you guys. I'm just gonna read it. My life began in crisis, but it also began under the sovereign hand of God. I was born dead. During my mother's labor, the umbilical cord wrapped around my head and pinched it off, cutting off oxygen. I woke up in my mother's womb drowning in amniotic fluid. Doctors rushed me to perform an emergency C-section, pulled me from my mother lifeless, and immediately placed me on life support. Tubes were inserted into my lungs to drain the fluid. The doctors told my parents that if I survived, I would likely be severely mentally or physically handicapped. But God had other plans. I lived. The doctors called me a miracle and told my parents they had much to be thankful for. Even before I took my first breath, God was sustaining me. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Jeremiah 1:5. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Growing up, I struggled in school because of the trauma my brain experienced at birth. Learning didn't come easily, and for a long time I felt behind and frustrated. Yet as the years went by, my brain slowly began to heal. By God's grace, I started to improve academically and even excel. Looking back, I can see God's quiet faithfulness at work. Though he fall, he shall not be casting headlong, for the Lord upholds his hand. Psalm 37:24. Then, in grade 10, when I was 15 years old, my life took another dramatic turn. I became very sick with what seemed like a cold and fever. My brother was sick as well, so we stayed home together. The next morning, I tried to go downstairs to watch TV, but my fever had climbed to 104 degrees. At that temperature, the body and mind began to shut down. I became delirious and fell down the stairs, fracturing my skull. I don't remember much after that. I woke up days later in a hospital room, having been in a unconscious coma. During that time, I was told I had been aggressive and confused, cursing at doctors and nurses. The only person who could calm me was my mom. When I finally became aware, I woke up in a dark hospital room and had to ask my mom why I was there. Doctors discovered bleeding between my skull and my brain and waited to see if it would drain on its own. The pain before surgery was unbearable. Pressure behind my eyes that felt like they would burst. When the bleeding didn't stop, doctors performed surgery, leaving me with a scar on the side of my head. After the surgery, the pain was gone. Once again, God spared my life. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. Psalm 18:2. After this, I finished grade 10 through homeschooling and then attended Saskatoon Christian School. This season was both painful and formative. I struggled with depression and often asked God, why did this happen to me? I wrestled with anger, confusion, and rebellion. Yet again, a Christian environment planted seeds in my heart. Even when I turned away, God never stopped working in me. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. At age 24, my parents moved to Winnipeg for work, and after losing my job in Saskatoon, I moved with them. I found a job at PartSource and worked there for about 2 years, the longest job I had ever held. Because of my head injury, I struggled with memory issues, which often led to mistakes and eventually losing jobs. I wanted more for my life, but I didn't know how to get there. I decided to pursue Christian Mennonite University and quit my job in August. That decision, however, left me feeling lost and purposeless. Fear and anxiety overwhelmed me, and weeks without sleep led me to psychosis. I was admitted to Seven Oaks Hospital. I believed God had abandoned me and that I was going to hell. In my despair, I turned to cigarettes and unhealthy coping mechanisms. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Psalm 42:5. About a year later, I attended Red River Bible College. During that time, I entered into a relationship that distracted me from my studies, and we quickly became engaged. On a destination wedding trip to Mexico, I made a devastating choice. I partied with the groomsmen that were there and cheated on my fiance. When I returned home, the relationship ended. I was consumed with shame and self-hatred, asking myself how someone raised in a loving Christian home could fall so far. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Romans 3:23. To numb the pain, I turned to drugs and alcohol. I began using cocaine and eventually dealt drugs to support my addiction. From 2015 to 2018, my life revolved around getting high and partying. Later, cannabis became my escape, and I was high nearly 24/7. I entered treatment for marijuana use, but addiction continued to tighten its grip. Through unhealthy relationships, I was introduced to harder drugs, crack and meth. At the peak of my addiction, I was unrecognizable. I lost extreme amounts of weight, my appearance deteriorated, and one morning I looked in the mirror and I didn't know who I was. That moment broke me. I asked my parents for help, and they stood by me once again, leading me to another recovery program. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Psalm 23:4. I experienced periods of sobriety followed by relapse. This painful cycle continued for years. Eventually, it led me to Union Gospel Mission. Today, I understand that my story is not about my failures. It is about God's mercy. Time and time again, He spared my life, carried me through trauma, and called me back to Himself. But God demonstrates His love for us in this way. While we are still sinners, Christ died for us. Romans 5:8. I am still in process, but I know this truth. I am alive because God is not finished with me. He who began a good work for you will carry it to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Philippians 1:6. That's it.